What's up, fuckers? It's time for some iced tea. Well, jumping fucking June bugs. Texas has frozen over. Jack Frost quit nipping at our nose and just went straight to third base. It's as cold as a Republican's heart in Texas right now. But it's not just Texas that's frozen. It appears hell has frozen over too. I mean, it'd have to be a cold day in hell for someone like Ted Cruz to suddenly decide he's a socialist. Now, he's got his hand out like a millennial. Well, never mind. He only believed in federal aid when he needed it, and that's very on brand for a Republican. So, if the snow glove on that begging hand fits. But Grandpa Munster isn't the only dim-witted dickface in Texas as useful as a piss hole in the snow. We also have Greg Abbott. He, of course, is as brain dead as an iced catfish, but who better to run the state where some Republicans are hoping that Texans will vote to leave the Union? They filed the bill on January 12th and then turned around and started begging for federal aid on February 15th. That lone star on our flag represents that lone brain cell floating around in our governor's cranium. He's decided to blame the Green New Deal and wind turbines for the blackouts we are experiencing here in Texas. Now, while wind turbines may be the leading culprit for windmill cancer, they aren't the main culprit for power outages in Texas. Not even close. Sounds like Greg Abbott is like the bottom of a fucking birdcage, just full of shit. The United States is divided into three power grids. One covers the east, one covers the west, and then there is the Texas grid, which almost covers the entire state. Texas, who wants federal aid, has its own power grid because we don't like federal interference. Our lawmakers are as sharp as snowballs down here. ERCOT, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, is the company that operates the electrical grid, and apparently it isn't that reliable. The grid operator manages the flow of electric power to more than 26 million Texas customers. Almost 4.5 million of those customers didn't have or still don't have power in freezing temperatures due to power outages and rolling blackouts. I guess the difficult decision to start rolling blackouts in Texas was quite easy for the current ERCOT board chair since he lives in Michigan. Will the electricity be shut off according to class? Yes, it will. Highland Park is one of the 6 most expensive neighborhoods here in Dallas, and ironically enough, Highland Park was lit up like the Las Vegas Strip when hundreds of thousands of others in Dallas and millions in the state had no power at all and sometimes no water. Former Governor Rick Perry, who could barely run the state, let alone his own bathwater, says that we Texans should be willing to suffer to keep federal regulators out of our power grid. How about we keep regulators out of women's private parts and keep them balls deep in our private power grid to keep it up and running, In the early 2000s, Texas politicians chose to deregulate the state's power market so private power companies could determine how and when we build and maintain the power plants. This same thing happened to our power grid in 2011, and the reason was lack of winterization. Same thing that happened this week. No power source here can handle this type of weather. Natural gas, coal, wind, crude oil, and solar production all failed. Pipeline freezes impeded the flow of natural gas and crude oil, and the wind turbines froze because they were not winterized. You have to winterize your car. Why not the state power system? The blackouts built as the grid was unable to keep up with the rise in demand. Republican politicians here have been warned about winterization and climate change repeatedly, but they haven't done a damn thing. But winterization costs money, and Texas should just suffer so our lawmakers can keep cutting corners and stay rich. I just hope now that all Texans have turned blue due to no power and freezing temperatures that we will all vote blue as well in the future. Nevertheless, Texas is not the only thing that's big, starts with the letter T, thought it was indestructible, and was brought to its knees by a little bit of ice. Remember the Titanic? That unsinkable ship that ignored all the warnings about ice that's currently sitting at the bottom of the ocean? Oopsie doopsie. You see, Texas leads the nation for wind power, but we have no winterization precautions to keep our turbines up and running. Titanic had a double bottom and 15 watertight bulkhead compartments equipped with electric watertight doors that could be operated individually or simultaneously. These watertight compartments are the reason Titanic was called unsinkable. However, while these individual bulkheads were watertight, the walls that separated them only extended a few feet above the waterline, so water could still pour from one compartment into another. Sounds like Titanic was as fragile as white Southern masculinity. Despite that painfully obvious design flaw, there was something worse. There were only enough lifeboats to hold about 1,200 passengers on a ship carrying 3,300 people. Ultimately, the poor people on the boat experienced their own kind of rolling blackouts called death. A lot of good people died in the cold because of choices made by a handful of greedy and selfish people who were warned repeatedly of danger. Titanic sank into the sea because it ignored warnings. You know who else is sinking because of ignored warnings? Maryland and Virginia. The ocean surrounding Maryland's coasts is slowly rising. Rising sea levels are a consequence of global climate change. Texas is freezing because of climate change. Greg Abbott said what we are experiencing with our power grid failure is why the Green New Deal would be deadly to the United States. Greg, there is no Green New Deal yet. I'm going to need you to shut your mouth faster than Ted Cruz getting on his flight to Cancun while we suffer through snowvid back here, okay? The Green New Deal is a congressional resolution that lays out a grand plan for tackling climate change. The proposal calls on the federal government to wean the United States from fossil fuels and help fight planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions across the economy. It also aims to guarantee new high-paying jobs in clean energy industries. Climate change is real. It is. And it's important that you understand weather and climate are different. Climate is what you expect. Weather is what you get. The weather is what you see outside on any particular day. Climate is the average of that weather. There is a link between warmer Arctic temperatures and colder North American winters. If we keep ignoring these warnings, we'll be at the bottom of the ocean with Titanic. I want everybody to have a great fucking day unless you believe anything that comes out of Greg Abbott's mouth.